Okay, so parallel lines is like if we had a line going like this, and then we had another line going like this. They're like railroad tracks, right? Well, and I might not have it drawn very well, but here's the key to parallel lines. They have the same slope. They have the same rise over run. So if you know the slope of this line, then you know the slope of the other line, okay? That's what parallel lines are. They have the same slope. Okay. Perpendicular lines, well, let me go back here a minute. If you called this, I'll give you some notation. If you called this line 1 and this line 2, then the slope of line 1 is equal to the slope of line 2. Okay. Perpendicular lines, those are like an intersection, right? Okay, so you have a line maybe going like this, and then you have a line going like, oh, well, straight, but, going like this. Anyway, perpendicular lines meet at right angles, okay? So one thing, you have one line going in like a positive direction and the other line going in a negative direction, usually for perpendicular lines, okay? So their relationship though, if I call this line 1 and this one line 2, we say that their slopes are opposite. Slopes are opposite reciprocals. So they have to be opposite because one line's going in a positive direction and the other line's going in a negative direction. And I say usually, there is like one exception to that, but I'll try to go over that in a minute. So you're going to have one positive slope, one negative slope, and then they're reciprocals of each other, okay? Now they write this a couple ways. One way they can say slope 2 is equal to the opposite reciprocal of slope 1. They can write it that way. Or sometimes they like to say m1 times m2. If you multiplied the two slopes, it would equal -1. Now it's probably easier for me just to give you some examples here. So let's say the slope of the first line in my drawing, let's say that, no, well, I meant to say slope. The slope is 1. Then the opposite reciprocal is -1. Now let's say the slope of your first line is 1/2. Then the first line. Then the opposite reciprocal would be -2. So you're like flipping it over and you're doing the opposite sign. Say the slope of your first line is -1/3. Then the slope of the second line that's perpendicular to it would be 3. So they have to be one negative, one positive, and then they're reciprocals of each other. And I did say there's one exception. The one exception is if you have like a vertical line and a horizontal line. Those are perpendicular to each other. Now, it looks like the axis system because I don't have a grid here, but we'll pretend that's my grid. And then I'll draw like a horizontal line. Let's say that's y equals 5. And then the perpendicular line, there's a bunch of perpendicular lines you could have, but say it's here. I should put little arrows on here. Say that one's x equals 3. Those lines are perpendicular to each other. Now, we didn't talk about this in the last video, but what's the slope of a vertical line? The slope of a vertical line, slope is undefined. What's the slope of a horizontal line? the slope is 0. And, you know, are those opposite reciprocals of each other? Well, yeah, they are, because if you do the reciprocal of 0, that's undefined. But anyway, I just point out that kind of exception to the rule. But might not seem like it follows the rule, but it really does. Okay, I guess it's not an exception, just something to think about. Okay, so that is a good point, though, that horizontal lines have a slope of 0, vertical lines have a slope that's undefined.